Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Cabral Concept. Great to have you with me here today on our Total Wellness Tuesday show, where we're going to be going over a new type of detoxification being discussed in functional medicine right now. So as always, I want you to be on the forefront of what we're talking about behind the scenes that most likely will never make it into the media for another 10 years, maybe 15 years or so. And so what we've been talking about lately is this thing called the third phase of detoxification. Now, I'm going to go through what all of that means, and honestly, from a real world perspective of what you can do and how it matters in your own life. So, it's great to have this in the medical literature, but really, how can you apply it to your life? And if there's no application in the real world, it's kind of like there's so many things to do, why even talk about it? So there are specific things that we can do. And that means we can get rid of these toxins from the environment that we're taking in on a daily basis in an even greater way. So I'm going to go through that, but a little controversy today only because I actually don't believe that it's a true phase of detoxification. And I'll go through why I don't believe it is a third phase of detoxification today. However, it's needed for the overall detoxification process. I just don't believe that we should be referring to it as the third phase of detoxification. However, I will show you, though, how it makes phase 1 and phase 2 even better and how it does its job to a much better degree. So really, what are we talking about? Well, I hope that you've tuned into previous shows where we've spoken about how right now in our environment, especially in the United States, we have close to now 100,000 man-made chemicals. How do we know this? Well, the World Health Organization, they, as well as the Environmental Working Group, are keeping the statistics on how many more man-made synthetic chemicals are being processed and put into our environment on a daily basis. Many of which have never been tested, most of which have never been tested together. So a lot of the times we see this thing called generally regarded as safe or an upper limit or here's the toxicity limit, but almost never do they test two chemicals together. So for example, what would happen if you were to add a pesticide such as glyphosate mixed with mercury in your tap water? What would happen? Well, we don't know. We don't test those things together. I mean, think about the scary propositions that could be. Another thing is this, when they test pharmaceutical drugs, okay, they test a statin drug, but they're not testing statin drugs combined with, let's just say, Xanax or something like that. So what we're looking at is our body being used as a science experiment because they're not forced by the FDA or other places to really test what happens when you combine them together. That's what I worry more about. Not always the individual, but I know most people, they're not on one pharmaceutical drug. They're on a handful. I looked at, and I wish I could find the photo. I'm going to go back. When my grandmother, she was her last couple months of life, and I think back, she wrote down all the medications she was taking on. I can look at it. I can see it in my mind right now. It's just how my brain works. It was a yellow-lined sheet of paper, and it was almost, I believe it was like 18 medications. And it was all the things that they were putting in her body. And a lot of times they had to give medications to then buffer the effect of that medication she was on previously. But anyway, today's not about pharmaceutical drugs. Today's not about medications. And I understand that some of those pharmaceutical drugs are needed to keep people alive. And so again, in those circumstances, I agree with it because I'm pro-people. But for the most part, what are we doing then to be able to rebalance the body so that we don't need to become dependent on these pharmaceuticals forever? Well, I want to talk to you today about detoxification. And if you haven't listened to any previous shows, I can't recommend enough going back to stephencabral.com/podcast and checking out previous shows. Because I'm not going to go over the pathways today. I will link up to a previous podcast on that. Why don't we do this? So today is episode 1131. So just head on over to stephencabral.com/1131. And I'm going to link over just to a couple shows on detoxification and maybe the toxicity quiz. So what I'd like you to know, though, is that you have this organ under the right side of your rib cage. It's called your liver. And your liver, it's a massive organ, and it's dark red. And mainly it's just filtering all of the blood in your body. Now, I shouldn't say mainly. It does a lot of other jobs, right? It's being able to synthesize hormones, etc. Well, here's a big job, though. Out of all the synthetic chemicals in the environment, we know that there's close to 100,000 now. We know that there are at least 77,000, half of which have been known to cause cancer. Well, what your liver does is when you get them in through your eyes, your nose, your mouth, through your skin, or through food, through tap water, whatever it might be, okay? When you take that in, it goes down your esophagus into your stomach. After that, it goes into the small intestine. We'll be talking about that in one moment because that has to do with phase 3 detox. And then it's going to be processed by the liver. So essentially, if things make it through the intestines and they need to be processed further or they need to be utilized by the body and they're not going to come out as stool or waste or urine, what it's done is it's transported to the liver. And the liver then is going to make a pass at it, at least one pass, where it's going to use the first phase of detoxification called phase 1. And I'm not going to go deep in that today. It's just typically in medical literature, it's referred to as the cytochrome P450 pathway. You don't need to know what that is. You never need to be able to know how to repeat it. Just know that the first phase of detox is your body's using antioxidants and it's using minerals and it's using glutathione to create an intermediary metabolite. So basically it takes this harmful toxin and then it breaks it down a little bit and it gets it ready to be changed into a water-soluble toxin, a hydrophilic-based metabolite. So this just means that it makes it water-soluble and it's goes through what's called a conjugation-based pathway in phase 2, and there uses things such as glucuronidation and other forms of conjugation using specifically sulfur-based amino acids. So the same things that you would get from cruciferous vegetables. Lots of broccoli and cauliflower and all those great cruciferous-based vegetables, and we're getting the sulfur from it. So what we're using, not just that, but we're using coarse sulforaphane, but we're using glutathione and glycine and acetylglycine, etc. And we're using those things to be able to break down harmful toxins into water-soluble toxins that can then come out through your urine and your sweat and your stool and even a little bit huffing it out through the lungs. So again, we've talked about saunas in the past. We've talked about all these great things. But today I want to talk about the next phase. So that's phase 1 and phase 2. That's how we eliminate toxins from our body. And we know that, hopefully we know that for thousands of years, even before all these synthetic chemicals, people were doing seasonal detoxes. They were doing seasonal detoxes all over the world, in South America and in India and Sri Lanka, and then in China with all different forms of medicine. People would build into religions and rituals and in herbal-based medicine how to detoxify the body. And that was always done. So it's one of those things that we've certainly forgot about it. I talked about it before, the 4 cleanses everyone should do to stay healthy every year. So check out that podcast if you'd like. But today, what I want to say is that's how our liver works. And of course, we support it with our 7-day detox. And you can always look into that just at equilibriumnutrition.com to see if it's the right fit for you. And again, you can work with your local practitioner, whatever you'd like to do. But in my opinion, it's no longer an option, especially if you take the toxicity quiz, which is completely free and written about in the Rain Barrel Effect and also on a free podcast. That, if you have a higher score, it's time to really start to empty that rain barrel. Because if you don't, dis-ease in the body is only a matter of time if it's not already here. The amazing thing about our body, and we're learning more every day, and that's why, it's such an egotistical thing when I see, it's in the natural health world and it's also in the conventional medicine-based world. But we're like, we can just fix anything and we know how everything works. Well, that's not the case. It's not the case at all. And it's why I'll continue to tell you, most likely forever, and I'll be doing this for quite some time longer, that if you're a true, let's just say healer, because you could come from many different disciplines, and if you believe in true healing, then you understand that we don't even know all of the intricacies of the body. Now, we know a lot, that's for sure, but what we need to do is simply give the body everything that it needs in order to heal itself. And we need to take out the side of the equation where we need to shut down things and mask symptoms, because that's not healing the body. That's shutting down certain pathways, which then forces those toxins or whatever's going on in your body out another pathway. And again, for anybody who doesn't believe in toxins, every medical doctor that I know of, and every naturopathic doctor and in most other disciplines, you take a toxicology class in graduate to get your doctoral degree. I mean, the many, many books on it. A book that I read was by, it's just called Toxicology, and it was McGraw-Hill. And I'm staring at it right now, and that's why I'm saying this. Catherett and Duels are the authors, and it's the basic science of poisons. So, I mean, this is a graduate level textbook, and this is something that is a real thing. And you can take a toxicity test. It's literally a urine-based test. I talked about it last Friday on the Friday review, and it will show you your toxicity level. Now, you don't never have to do that if you don't want to, but this is a real thing. I just want people to know, like, this is real. When you walk outside and you're being exposed to pollution and the trains and subways and brake dust and the fumes, all of those things, that's real. Whether you can see it or not, it's real. And when you drink a glass of tap water and you're exposed to chlorine and fluoride and heavy metals, that's real. So again, like these things are around us. We can't pretend like they don't exist. We don't have to get overly worried about it, but we do need to make sure that we're supporting our detox pathways. So again, what are some of the amazing things that we're figuring out? Well, we're always figuring out new things about the gut. Why are we always looking into that? Well, here's why. If you were to flatten out your intestines, you were to flatten out your gut, it's about 28 feet long or so. It's give or take depending on the size of the individual. It would cover the entire square footage of a tennis court. Think about how big a standard tennis court is. And your gut looks pretty small, right? We'll take that out. Now flatten the entire intestines, flatten all the villi, which are the finger-like structures that we'll be talking about in just one moment, and all the enterocytes. That surface area of your gut would cover an entire tennis court. So there's a lot to study. And as we become more advanced as humans and our science, remember, all these people say, oh, well, it's not proven by science. Listen, look at the science 200 years ago. We weren't even using sanitary-based procedures. We weren't using soap in delivery-based rooms. We weren't using like any of these things. We didn't even have all these lab tests. So please don't preach that it's not proven by science, because every 50 years we make tremendous strides in science. So think about where we'll be at in 50 years. Then look back 200 years from then, it will be prehistoric. Well, in 200 years, what we're doing today will be prehistoric, right? I mean, so let's be careful of what we choose to believe is, real science and not yet, because real science changes every 100 years. So again, that's why I read all of the research, all of the articles out there. But I also always say, does this pass the Ayurvedic test? Does this pass traditional Chinese medicine? Does this pass all the ancient healing-based practices? And if it doesn't, I have a hard time accepting it right away, because I'm not willing to use anyone in my practice or anyone on this podcast as a guinea pig. I just don't think that's a good idea. I just don't. I mean, look back to all of the different pharmaceuticals or interventions when they were first being used, sometimes with, really grave consequences. So I'm not willing to do that. But what I want to do is keep up with the medical research so that we can bring you great things like we're about to discuss right now, which is this third phase of detoxification. And I'll explain to you why I believe it's important. Of course, it's part of our body's systems, but I don't believe that it is a third phase of detox. Okay. Now, again, I reserve the right to change my mind in the future because I understand what's going on. I see what it is. But if you show me new research in the future, I reserve that right. That's the way that is. And that's how any good practitioner should be. When better data comes along that works in the real world, that's safe for individuals, you should accept it. You shouldn't stick to your dogma, your practices. I'm telling you right now, continue to, really take names and look around at the industry for all the people who promoted the Atkins diet at one point, and then they're promoting keto now, like keto for everyone. And look at them. I mean, really, take notes. Because if they move on to the next hot thing when it's the next hot thing, then all you're going with is what's in the media. You're not going by true science, meaning it's not good for everyone. Not everything is good for everyone, right? Like super low carb, not good for everyone. All meat diet, certainly not good for everyone, right? Or for a lot of people, big salads all day long, not great for everyone either. So again, we're always talking about the individual. And before I keep going on a rant, let me pull things back to this third phase of detoxification. Okay, so what exactly is it? Well, we talked about how the liver is the true detoxifier of our body. It's what breaks down these harmful toxins so they don't end up in our brain, our adipose tissue, like we've been talking about over the past couple of weeks, and swell our fat stores. A lot of people don't know they become over fat, which is the medical terminology for it, because they literally swell those fat stores. We have this. Again, this is proven science. When someone loses body fat, their blood then can contain chemicals, toxins from years ago that have been stored there. We know that this happens. And as that happens, more water begins to swell the adipose tissue. So you actually look more puffy and more swollen. And that's why detoxes help people from a true medical standpoint, and not just weight loss through reduction in calories or fasting. It's actually through reduction in adipose tissue and then being able to clean up all the byproduct, all the toxins out of the blood, which is 300 times more toxic than your blood itself. And again, this is proven. So we're just trying to help that. And your liver mainly does that. But now we have new emerging evidence, new evidence showing that there is a system inside of the small intestine. More specifically, so the villi, which I talked about before, the finger-like structures. Now, on top of those are called enterocytes. And they are actually smaller, essentially finger-like structures. And what this is being referred to is the anti-porter system. Now, I like to think of the villi as a shag carpet. If you've ever seen a shag carpet, basically has all those little fingers on it, and that's at a microscopic level what the intestines look like. And I was actually just teaching this in IHP level 2 for food sensitivity testing, and how over time with antibiotics, ibuprofen, alcohol, birth control, chlorine, chemicals in the body, stress, you can actually break down those finger-like structures. Well, this is when detox becomes, again, inhibited, because we're now finding that these villi, the villi, and the enterocytes, called the now anti-porter system, is actually a first pass. So I'll get to phase 3 in a moment, why it would make sense to call this phase 0. So if you wanted to call this phase 0, I'd be okay with that. Because in this phase, what you're doing is you're actually saving the liver from having to filter more toxins. Because as food comes into your stomach, what the anti-porter system is doing is giving it its first pass to be able to shuttle these to the immune system or remove them right out of the body. So pretty interesting. They're called efflux transporters. And what they're doing is they're looking for specific toxins. So they're actually mobilizing to see things that are non-human, that are not able to be used by your body. So pretty impressive in its own right to be able to co-regulate detoxification, but in the small intestine before it would ever make it to your liver. So pretty important right there again, like I said. But here's the other thing, and this is why it's now being called more of a phase 3 system, is that once the toxins have been moved through that liver, that big organ under the right side of your body, and again, this is happening with every child, every adult out there, and your liver filters all the blood in your body every 6 minutes. And as it's doing that, it's pumping it back into the intestines. A lot of the time, it's actually put in the bile. And the bile then is being dropped. Well, here's what happens as well. In this phase 3, we are enabling, they're called hydrophilic substances, and it just means basically water soluble now, where the transport system is able to initiate this detoxification along with phase 2. It simply means that it is able to turn on those hepatic cells in the liver, hepatocytes, with phase 2 conjugation, and then be able to bring those metabolites and pump them right out of the body. So again, pretty important, right? I mean, this is an amazing system, but it gets even better. So this is why as a practitioner too, continue to do your research. Never believe that you've known it all, because this is an emerging science right here. Well, here's what happens. If you have many years of antibiotic use, if you have a lot of inflammation because of IBS, IBD, celiac, Crohn's, colitis, SIBO, you have parasites, you have H. pylori, you have candida overgrowth. Okay, if you have any of these things, you have inflammation in the gut, you most likely have some blunted villi. You've got some knockdown villi. They're not functioning well enough, okay? Or you might have massive biofilms that have been created in your intestines. Well, now here's where it gets really interesting. If this happens and there's a breakdown in phase 3, let's call it phase 3, the anti-porter system, there's actually a feedback loop to the rest of the body, including the liver, that it's not able to detox as well. So now when this anti-porter system becomes overwhelmed, the body gets additional signals that it's not able to keep up. So when I look at this, I see just even more so, the utmost importance of really having a clean, healthy gut. What does this mean? It means no bacterial overgrowth, no parasites, no H. pylori, no yeast overgrowth. Is that we have a balanced, well-functioning gut so that we are able to detoxify our body, able to absorb more nutrients, and that's going to give us the energy and vitality that we all want. Really pulling this all together, this phase 3 detoxification, whatever you want to call it, is of the utmost importance. When your body is excreting toxins, whether it's from your cells or it might be from the food that you take in, it's actually drawing it into the intestinal lumen, the cells, the wall of the intestines, and it's saving your liver extra work. Because it's already, again, everything you take in through your skin, the cosmetics, the shampoo, the toothpaste, they're getting into the bloodstream and being brought to the liver, and your liver has to detox them all day long. I cannot stress the importance of this. And that stress can wear you down. Well, now we know that there's a helper out there, and that is that 28 feet of gut, or at least we know at least in that small intestinal-based part where we're able to use these enterocytes and use phase 3 detoxification in order to be able to get more of these harmful chemicals out of our body on a daily basis. So I just wanted to bring that to you today. Whatever you want to classify it, honestly, it's just semantics. I like to classify it as more of like phase 0 of detoxification, but you can call it phase 3, you can call it whatever you'd like. I like to say it's another helping system that our gut uses in order to be able to keep our bodies clean and disease-free. I will be absolutely back with more of this in the future. And I look forward to, of course, keeping up the research. If it changes, if there's any updates, you know that I'll bring it to you on the Cabral Concept. I appreciate you, as always, tuning in. If there's any questions on this, of course, let me know. And on the show notes today, head on over to stephencabral.com/1131. And what I'll do is I'll actually link up the toxicity test. I'll link up the functional medicine detox. I will link up previous shows if you don't know exactly how the liver works, and even our toxicity quiz there as well. So whatever we can do to help you out, you always let us know. We're happy to help. And thanks again for tuning in. As always, please do feel free to share this episode with anyone else you believe it could serve. Take care. Did you know that the body really only becomes sick or imbalanced in only 2 ways? Over time, you become deficient in vital nutrients, and you also accumulate toxins internally and from the environment. As those nutrients diminish and you increase your total toxic load, your body then begins to show the first signs of dis-ease. It's actually quite predictable, and the good news is that if we know how you began to fill up that proverbial rain barrel, we also know how to empty it to begin the healing process. I was fortunate enough to learn this ancient healing process from my mentor after suffering from debilitating diseases for close to a decade. It was only when I began to implement these techniques did I finally overcome my illnesses and go on to live a life of energy and vitality that I now enjoy. I'd like to share with you now what I discovered after traveling all over the world and how to combine the best of ancient healing wisdom with state-of-the-art science. Allow me to teach you exactly how I've been able to help over 250,000 people to empty their rain barrel and begin to transform their body and lives into what they've always hoped they could be. To get your copy of the international bestseller, The Rain Barrel Effect, simply go to stephencabral.com/rainbarrel.